Stan Gibilisco here. One of my favorite places to go when I first moved to Miami, Florida from the Hartford, Connecticut area was Bill Baggs State Park, more commonly known as Cape Florida State Park at the southern tip of Key Biscayne. It had a beautiful beach, beautiful water, and in the backdrop a whole lot of Australian pines, very tall, spreading pines that are not native to Florida, but grow in abundance, especially in South Florida, until the wind blows them down. And because they're not native, they're not very wind tolerant, particularly for hurricane winds. Any wind over, sustained wind over about 75 to 80 mile an hour will usually blow them down. Well, in 1979, the summer of 1979 was the first summer I spent in Miami. And I used to go there a lot to Cape Florida State Park, Bill Baggs State Park, which I used to affectionately refer to as Bilbo Baggins. After moving around, wandering around the state of Florida for a number of years, I moved back again in 1991, I believe it was, in the summer of 1991. I moved back to Florida from Minnesota. I had been living in St. Paul, Minnesota from about 1988 to 1991, and in the October of 1991 I moved back to South Florida, and again used to go to Cape Florida State Park a lot, and it was still the same as it had been. But on August 24th, 1992, that park was transformed drastically by an event called Hurricane Andrew. Every single one of those Australian pines was blown flat to the ground by sustained winds somewhere on the order of 150 mile an hour. From the mainland, at another park that I used to frequent called Matheson Hammock, you could look over towards Key Biscayne after that hurricane and see just where the edge of the eye wall had cut through Key Biscayne. It was about halfway down the key. You could see some foliage and trees and things like that in the northern half of Key Biscayne, but once you got to the southern half, right away after that hurricane, it was just flat. You could hardly even tell that there was any island there at all from that distance. Today, Cape Florida State Park has been rejuvenated, but with more native vegetation that can withstand hurricane winds much better than could those Australian pines. Big, beautiful pine trees they are, but also quite fragile, and their fragility was demonstrated with great drama by that hurricane, Hurricane Andrew, whose eye wall's northern edge passed right about over the center of Key Biscayne. As I mentioned in another video, I was in Homestead, Florida for that hurricane, and the hurricane made a direct hit exactly where I was. The eye, even the center of the eye, passed right over where I was. But that was just another one of my favorite hangouts. I never went back to Cape Florida State Park after the hurricane. Never went back there. Never saw what kind of vegetation was eventually put in place of those Australian pines. But I have read and heard that it's more beautiful than ever after being flattened to ground level by violent, almost otherworldly winds. Just a little bit of reminiscing again. On the coldest night of the season so far, it is 16 degrees below zero at about 6:30 or so in the morning. What am I doing up at that hour on a Sunday, you ask? I'm not going to answer that. Stan Gibilisco signing off. Until next time, so long.